Steve Donell, how long have we known each other?
At least 15 years.
Well, I know that out of the gate, I like your name especially because it has Nell in it.
There you
And
go.
so, if we were ever a team, it'd be Nell and Donell. I think people would think it was a mistake.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember you were one of my first lunches in the networking group we're part of, and I was a newer agent because it was 15 to 18 years ago. Because
I think that's
I'm going on 20 years of business right now.
Yeah,
So it's great to have you here. It's great to be, connected with you again and see you more lately. I really appreciate that.
definitely.
Yeah. And so I know that when it comes to being a receiver, being a property manager, you basically run your own property management company. You're also an expert witness. I mean, is there anything you don't do?
I don't cook.
You don't cook? Fair enough. Fair enough. The great thing about you is every time anyone ever talks about you, it's like he is the nicest guy. And I said, I'll be the judge of that. We'll see how that works out. And
Yes.
then, and of course, your expertise is beyond compare. I mean, I've experienced it myself, and so it's just great to have you on board or have you here because I wanted to talk to you, get some of your stories, your health stories. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. And so remember too, this I'm not going to depose you, so you can elaborate here. You're not going to get in any trouble at all. And so tell me if you could, in your own words, tell us more about who you are and what your business is, what you lean into.
Sure. So I've been, it's a family business. So I work with my dad, my brother, and my background is in real estate. My dad has been in real estate for his entire career. I majored in real estate, and I've been here at this company, Jalmar Properties, for almost 40 years.
Hmm.
And I didn't plan on working with my dad, but that's the way it turned out. I worked after college for a couple of years, and so I really do three core things. We're a property management and investment company, commercial and residential properties.
Hmm.
Um, First and foremost, and number two, I serve as a property management standard of care expert witness. So any type of injury on properties or standard of care issues regarding management of properties. And then the third thing I do is in the fiduciary arena. I'm what's called a court-appointed receiver
Hmm.
and a partition referee, and I sell property and businesses through court order. And in order for me to get involved in that process, there's typically some unhappy people. They're always in litigation, and a lot of times the underlying asset is in trouble, and which makes my role much more difficult in terms of selling the asset or the property.
Right, right. So for them to put that kind of responsibility on you, I mean, how many years have you been doing this?
I've been doing receivership work for about 25 years.
Hmm. Great. It was interesting when I first met you. I didn't even know what a receiver was. I was thinking, what is he talking about? What
Yeah.
does he receive? I thought it was like a football term or something.
Yeah, a lot of people do not know what it is, even lawyers. So it's a real niche business.
Hmm. Well, you've owned it, so that's fantastic. So you have any? So let's talk about some stories. So we call it real estate hell with Scott Nell because hell rhymes with Nell. Really, it's just about challenges that you faced and then what you did to overcome them. So do you have something you want to share with us?
Yeah, look, many times I'm appointed by the court specifically because the real estate is in hell. It is in litigation hell.
Hmm.
It is in some level of distress, and it could be anything from environmental contamination to partners that are fighting with each other. It can involve fraud. I handle cases with the Federal Trade Commission and the Securities and Exchange Commission involving consumer fraud and investment fraud. And sometimes when I do my takeovers, the Department of Justice will be on one side and the FBI will be on another. And
Hmm.
my activities are always in civil court, but sometimes these get involved in federal criminal court as well. And so you can imagine I've sold hundreds of properties. I'm a real estate broker. Um, and in my capacity as a receiver, I sell properties subject to court order. There's a couple of things that come to mind. One, a home here in Los Angeles. I got appointed to sell the home. It was a family dispute, and there was a sister that was living in the home, and she was a hoarder, and she would not cooperate with allowing us to get in the home. We ultimately got a court order, and I was able to get her out. And I had to hire a company to get huge, 4 yarders out in the driveway. And it was about a 2 week process to get everything out of the home. Then we found out it had mold and a bunch of roaches and animals living there. It was
Wow.
terrible.
What kind of animals?
Well, rats, raccoons. It was amazing that the woman was able to even live there.
Yeah.
And it was a very expensive process. I was able to put a loan on the property to fund all of this work.
Hmm.
Uh, we then cleaned it up. We actually brought in some biohazard people, got it cleaned up, and got it staged, and ultimately sold it. But that was a tough one because I was not only dealing with the problem with the home, I was dealing with some mental illness issues, and I had to address that issue with some delicacy because the sister that was still living in the home didn't really quite understand what was happening. So we did get some county health folks involved. So that was a challenge.
Well, it's nice when you can go in there and just not be cold-hearted and really actually watch out for someone. I find in a lot of deals that I do, sometimes a little empathy goes a lot more distance. It takes you further than coming in there and taking off the gloves out the gate.
You
So,
know, you're absolutely right. And as a receiver, I've got a lot of power because I have a court order. And
mhm,
but I try to treat people the way I want to be treated. And if they decide not to comply with the court order and not to be cooperative, then I got another side of me that I can use when I need to.
mhm,
Uh, another story that comes to mind was it's a retail shopping center, and it was the grandparents acquired the property in the
mhm,
50s, and then the grandparents passed away, and then it through the trust it went to their children, and then through the third generation of grandchildren started fighting. So I was appointed by the court as what's called a partition referee to sell
mhm,
the property, and I ran a title report on the property. It was a shopping center, a retail center on Robertson Boulevard in West LA. And we found a loan on the property from the 1990s. And the family told me, no, there's no debt on this property. And I said, well, the loan had not been reconveyed. The
mhm,
reconveyance had not been recorded. Nobody knew anything about this loan because it had been originated with the grandparents. And in speaking with one person after another, many of the family members had lived or still lived in Israel. And one of the cousins said that he had remembered that a rabbi for the family knew something about this loan. And I was
mhm.
put in touch with this rabbi who was in his 80s. And the rabbi referred me to somebody that had moved back to Israel. And I was able to track down this individual who remembered the grandparents fondly and said, yeah, I was paid off many years ago on that loan. He thought it was amazing that I was able to find him, and I was able to get him to execute a reconveyance in Israel with the equivalent of a notary in Israel. And
Mhm.
the title company here in the United States accepted it, and I felt like a detective. But I got clean title, and I
Uh-huh.
was I was able to sell the property free and clear of liens, and that was a challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but that's great. Do you ever use investigators, or do you kind of put your hands together and think it's kind of a fun thing for you to do yourself?
Nope, I do. I have had to use investigators. I've had to do stakeouts, and I've had to track people down. So I definitely have used investigators before. I
Mhm.
deal with some shady characters.
Wow, God, it's amazing during this podcast, the people I've talked to, the stories that come up, because you don't get to these stories very often if you're out having a lunch or something like that. That's one of the reasons I enjoy this so much.
Yep. Yeah.
All right, what else do you have?
Well, another interesting story. When I take over, I do commercial and residential. There was another situation where it was a single family home, and again, it was a relative. So a lot of times, I get appointed by the court when the children inherit the home, and maybe there's three siblings, and two of them want to sell, and maybe one of them doesn't.
Right.
And there was one situation where one of the siblings was living in the home. They weren't paying rent, so they weren't a tenant, but they were an occupant. And I had a court order to sell the home empty. And the sibling, it was the sister, she would not leave. And so, unlike the traditional eviction, which here in California it's known as a UD action or an unlawful detainer action,
Mm-hmm.
where you file for a UD against a tenant. Well, if you've not established tenancy rights, but you are an occupant, there is a procedure known as an ejection action. And so I filed an ejection action with my attorney, and I ultimately got an order to have the sheriff come, and we got a writ of possession. And the day before the writ of possession was issued through the sheriff, she then filed personal bankruptcy. And so we then had to get the relief from stay on her bankruptcy, and that was lifted. And then she filed an appeal of the original ejection action, which was actually untimely. She filed it too late. So we had to deal with that process. And then we had to wait for the sheriff to come out, which can take a couple of months. And so this process that I've just described took about 8 months. The entire time she was living in the house rent free, and her siblings were getting more and more upset with her. But yeah, I ultimately got the order and got her out and brought in my realtor and cleaned up the home
Mm-hmm.
and sold it. But it was quite a process. Definitely a process.
Absolutely. Yeah, I find there's been a lot of deals where that I've worked on myself where you think there's going to be a problem, someone hangs out, and eventually you come to find out that it's usually something very personal. They feel very wronged,
Yep,
or they feel like they're being mistreated. And when you just give them a little bit of empathy, it's amazing how that can work, but not always though.
it can, but not always.
Yeah,
And by the time I get into the picture, that effort for empathy with the family members,
yeah,
it's pretty much come and gone. I'm kind of the last resort to have to file a lawsuit. So I make a lot of people very happy when I do what I do, but I make another group of people very unhappy when
yeah,
I show up with the court order.
yep, absolutely. Do you have a charity or a cause that really is close to your heart that you could share?
Yeah, I would say City of Hope. One of my immediate family members battled an extended illness, and City of Hope was very very good to that family member. And I spent a lot of time at City of Hope for many many months. So it's a great organization that helps people quite a bit.
That's great. Can you tell us more about it and I mean, how long have you been part of that and what do you see the money going towards specifically? Maybe a little more detail?
Yeah, well, you can, there are programs through City of Hope involving cancer. Had a family member that battled some cancer, and City of Hope, I think, really treats people with a lot of dignity and a lot of respect and a lot of professionalism. And there's a lot of wonderful doctors and a lot of wonderful facilities, but we just had a really really good experience with our family member there. So it'll always be near and dear to my heart.
That's great. It seems that most of the time people when they're talking about charities because it's touched their heart.
Definitely,
And
definitely.
as you know, with mine, it's either the Scouts because all three kids are in the Scouts, and I love what that does for the kids, or it's Mercy Childcare because of our daughter being from Africa, and so
Yes,
needless to say, those ones I can be very passionate about.
absolutely,
Yeah.
totally.
Is there anything else that you would like to share while we're here?
Yeah, well, I do have one other story. I use real
Great.
estate brokers. I use realtors and real estate brokers and real estate firms all the time, and have a feeling you'll be going to be hearing from me too. I actually have a potential property up in the valley that I've been thinking about you on.
Ah, very
Um,
good.
and the real estate brokers and or the lawyers involved in my cases are normally my allies.
Mhm.
There was a case actually this year in 2024. I sold an apartment building in Brentwood, and again, it was four siblings, not three, but this time it was four siblings.
Mhm.
And one of the lawyers in the case got so involved that he actually he interfered with my ability to sell the property. He started contacting buyers directly. He was sending out emails to brokers representing buyers, and we had a sale ready to go. We went into court. We got an order to confirm the sale because all of my sales are subject to court order. And
Mm-hmm.
at the last minute, he said no. He had somebody that wanted to overbid and pay more, which we reluctantly said okay, but we were concerned about the qualifications of the buyer, and he assured
Sure.
us that the buyer was going to close, and we did get evidence of cash in the bank. So we unwound the first sale. The second overbidder buyer came in. He then promptly bombed out on us. And we then had to, the initial buyer said, I don't want anything to do with this. And we ultimately sold the property for about $300,000 less.
Oh
And this
man.
lawyer continued to interfere. And one of the brokers latched onto him and thought that he was going to be sort of a hero, and all they were doing was interfering. And ultimately, I got an order from the court that awarded about $20,000, essentially in penalties against the lawyer. And you can imagine that sibling whose lawyer conducted himself this way was not happy because when I did the distribution on the sales proceeds, that sibling got $20,000 less. So that was a rare instance where the professionals in the case were the ones that really were causing the problems, and they're the ones that are supposed to solve the problems. So, and I've got a million other war stories, but my cases are just inherently difficult because of the
Mm-hmm.
fact that the parties are angry. There's existing litigation. It's subject to court confirmation,
Right.
that's the world I live in.
So on this last one you were talking about where the attorney interfered, you would think that an attorney would know better because
You'd
you'd
think
think
that
you'd
the attorney
understand.
would know better. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was shocking. It was really, really shocking. I think he just thought he was the smartest person in the room. I think he
Mm-hmm.
was trying to make himself look like a hero, and it really backfired. The judge did not take kindly to what he did at all. He fought hard on my motion to distribute funds, and the judge just shot him down completely.
Yeah, it's interesting because I work with a lot of attorneys and they seem to either be fantastic to work with because they're working with you, they're trying to understand you, they're not being combative. And then there's ones that just think, like you said, just think they know everything. And I'm going like, gosh, you keep on getting in the way of this deal. And the reason the deal's not working is because you're interfering and you're talking to the buyers and you're you're basically not letting me do what I'm an expert at doing. And so we lose buyers over it, and then it would inevitably they would say, "Well, what we lost them because of you," and I'm going,
Yep.
"No, you would have." There's just so many stories where it's like all you got to do is just step back, and this would have been done months ago.
Yeah, look, there's the deal killer real
Yeah,
estate brokers and the deal killer lawyers, and I've seen real estate brokers or agents, just negotiate their clients into the bottom of the stack.
right.
So there's really a fine art at understanding, how to be competitive, and there's nothing wrong with advocating for your client, but
Sure.
especially in a situation where you have a lot of competition, sometimes keeping it a little bit more simple is a much more effective approach.
No, totally, totally. The two deals that we're closing in the next week is because they got multiple offers, and the reason we went ultimately with the particular buyer was because one of the reasons that other people got kicked out was I would put in the notes because you have a breakdown of the offer and whatnot. And then I talk about the agent. And I'll say this agent, I'll call one of them is Avi Barazani. He's a very good agent. He's a great agent. I worked with him in the past. He's not a troublemaker. He's really smart. If they can get stepped up to this price, I would love to go with his buyer because of this. And that's the reason they got it. But he definitely got in touch with me right away. Built a we already had a relationship. But if
Yeah,
an agent doesn't go out of their way to build a relationship with me, I'm going like, what are you doing that you don't even give me a call? You just send an offer without a call. I don't understand that.
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, sometimes that warm touch can mean a lot, and prior history as well, reputation. I
Mm-hmm.
actually have an apartment building in Santa Monica that I'm looking at selling, and one of the people that made an offer on it, uh, I have a long history with that buyer on a
Mm-hmm.
couple of other deals, and it's not a good history. So you can
Mm-hmm.
imagine that they don't exactly have a great competitive advantage with me as a result of that.
Right. Right. And so, yeah, first thing when one of my team comes to me and they say, "All right, I'm having problems. I'm not sure what to do on this. So all these offers, I always ask, well, who's the other agent?
Yeah.
Or I'll say, did you call the other agent? Or they'll say, yeah, it's so and so. I'm like, okay, don't worry. I'm gonna make a call and let them know that I got your back. But it's about working together, and it's rare that we don't close because we're always working together with our eye on the prize. It's like pretty
Yep.
straight.
And it's the buyers, it's the agent, and if they're represented by an attorney, which most of my buyers are because it's a court situation, who are their lawyers? And most of the time it's great. There's a ton of great lawyers, ton of great agents
Mm-hmm.
out there, but every now and then you run into a problem situation and you have to tiptoe gently.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was talking to someone recently about that, and they said, "Hey, name a time that you had out of 10 that think about a time when it was a 4." And I'm going like, pretty much every day it's at least a 4 because you're selling millions of dollars worth of real estate. It's rare that it's a 1 or 2. It's usually between a 4 and a 7, and when it gets above that, it takes a lot of finesse, and you better have an experienced agent at that point.
Exactly. You're right.
Yeah.
Same experience.
Well, didn't I tell you it was going to be quick and easy?
Very quick, very easy.
People don't want to listen for an hour. You know, the one time they listened for that was a really long time, and we cut hardly anything out. It was an actor friend of mine that was on, and he was so entertaining and fun. At the end of it, I went like, how do you cut anything out of this?"
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it came down to his charity was St. Jude's, and he was so choked up
Wow.
about it, sincerely about what it does to help these families, and told the story of how St. Jude came, how they started and people in his life that it helped. And I was just blown away. I was like coming to tears myself thinking, gosh, dude. So
That's
I
cool.
sent him a text the next day. I said, you totally effed things up for me. And he goes, what do you mean? You didn't like it? I said, no, you set the bar too high.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah. If you ever want to watch an interesting one, it's with Kevin Rom.
Okay.
He's an actor you may or may not recognize, but he's been around a lot. He's really fantastic. But
Oh,
he's a
nice.
good person to look up. Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was great.